Margaret Ainsley did not call Lena Keegan a cheater. She did something worse. She left a clean space in the room where the word cheater was supposed to fit. "We cannot certify your daughter's score tonight, Mr. Keegan." Her voice came through the microphone in the high school gym, calm and careful, with the scholarship board seated under the basketball hoop, the state auditor at the folding table, and half the town watching from the bleachers. Then Margaret looked down at the score report. A result like this does not match a student from her profile. That was the sentence. Not poor. Not father works with his hands. Not no tutor, no prep school, no donor name, no one on the board waiting to make a phone call. Margaret did not need to say any of that. 400 people heard it anyway. In the third row, 16-year-old Lena Keegan sat with her scholarship folder pressed flat against her knees. A minute earlier, she had been sitting straight, waiting for her name to be read with the other recipients. After Margaret said profile, Lena's shoulders moved inward, just a little, enough for her father to see. Roy Keegan did not move. He was still in his work shirt. Sawdust sat in the creases of his knuckles. A thin line of dried glue clung to his cuff from a cabinet job he had rushed to finish before driving his daughter to the meeting. The room looked at him and saw exactly what Margaret wanted them to see. A single father, a carpenter, a man who probably could not explain the kind of score his daughter had earned. Someone in the bleachers whispered. Two students turned around to look at Lena. A parent near the aisle shook his head like the whole thing was sad but obvious. And from the board table, Margaret added one more careful sentence. "We have a responsibility to protect the integrity of opportunities meant for deserving students." Deserving students. Lena heard that too. She did not cry. She just folded the scholarship folder closed. That was the moment Roy understood what was really being taken from her. Not only the money, not only the full ride that had a certification deadline in 3 days, not only the place at the state honors program that would disappear if the flag stayed on her file, her name. And what nobody in that gym knew was that the proof of Lena's name was not in a lawyer's brief, a private tutor's email, or a donor's phone call. It was in a cheap blue spiral notebook sitting in Roy's truck, bent under a box of cabinet screws. Before that night was over, Margaret Ainsley would have to look at that notebook. The board would have to open a sealed problem. The clock would start, and the same room that had just made Lena Keegan feel small would have to watch exactly how her mind worked. Roy had raised Lena alone since she was 4. Their house was small enough that the kitchen table did 3 jobs: dinner table, bill table, and homework desk. One leg wobbled unless Roy folded cardboard under it. The refrigerator made a clicking sound at night. The truck started on the second try most mornings, and on the third try when it rained. Roy measured things for a living: cabinets, door frames, stair rails, spaces inside homes where the closets were bigger than Lena's bedroom. He did not have a degree. He did not use big words when simple ones would do. He had never sat on a board, never chaired a committee, never learned how people could hide cruelty inside phrases like process and integrity review. But Roy knew measurements, and every night when Lena worked at that kitchen table, he taught her the rule that had kept his work honest for 30 years. You never trust the first number. Lena would look up from algebra, tired and annoyed. Roy would tap the paper. You find it a second way. If both answers match, then you can trust it. It was carpenter's math, plain, repetitive, unfancy. But Lena took it further than Roy ever could. She took it into algebra, then calculus, then physics, then the state scholarship exam that could pay for a future Roy could not build with overtime, weekend jobs, or another year of eating the cheap cereal so Lena could have the good kind. For 4 months, Lena kept one notebook in Roy's truck, not because it was special, because the truck was where the extra minutes were. 10 minutes before school, 15 minutes after Roy picked her up from the library, 20 minutes in the hardware store parking lot while he priced hinges for a job. Every page was dated. Every wrong answer stayed on the paper. Roy would not let her erase the bad work. "Don't hide the bad cut," he would say. "That's how you learn where the blade slipped." So the notebook filled up with crossed-out equations, arrows, corrected steps, ugly first attempts, cleaner second attempts, and the same 2 words written over and over in the margins. Second way. When Lena's score came back near the top of the region, Roy did not shout. He stood in the kitchen holding the letter with both hands. Lena tried to act calm, but she kept walking past the refrigerator after he put it under the yellow star magnet. For 9 days, that score lived there. For 9 days, Roy watched his daughter pretend she was not smiling. Then the review notice arrived. Statistical irregularity. 2 words that looked polite on paper. 2 words that meant somebody had decided Lena Keegan was not supposed to score that high. The board meeting was supposed to be a formality, names read into the district record, scholarships certified before Friday's state deadline. Families taking pictures in the gym, students pretending not to care while secretly waiting to hear their names through the microphone. But when the chair reached Lena's result, Margaret Ainsley leaned toward her own microphone. "I request that this score be held for integrity review." The room changed, not loudly, that was the cruel part. It changed in glances, in parents sitting up straighter, in students turning their heads, in one soft laugh from the back row that died quickly but not quickly enough. Margaret Ainsley was not just any board member. Her name was on the new science wing. Her checks paid for uniforms, travel fees, scholarship dinners, and the kind of programs that made people call her generous in public. She was also the mother of Brendan Ainsley, the student who had placed 1 seat behind Lena. Margaret did not mention that. She did not have to mention many things. "We owe honest students a process they can trust," she said. "Honest students." Roy felt Lena's hand tighten around the edge of her chair. The state assessment office had sent an auditor because flagged scores had to be resolved before certification. He sat beside the chair with a sealed packet of verification problems, a scoring rubric, and the kind of expression that said he had seen nervous parents before. A reporter from the county paper sat near the aisle, pen ready, because scholarship night was usually an easy community story. Now it was something else. Margaret turned 1 page. "This is not about embarrassment," she said. "This is about fairness. A score this far outside a student's academic profile raises questions." There it was again, profile, a word with clean shoes and dirty hands. Lena looked down at her folder. Roy saw her thumb rubbing the corner until the paper bent. The stakes were simple. If the board refused to certify her score that night, the full scholarship could disappear. If the integrity flag moved forward, the word would follow Lena into college files, recommendation letters, hallway whispers, and every congratulations that came with a pause. Not failure, worse, maybe fraud. Margaret looked at Roy then, and her voice softened in the way people soften a blade before they slide it in. "Mr. Keegan, there is a simple way to protect your daughter from more discomfort." Roy did not answer. Let Lena retake the assessment next month privately under supervision. If the result holds, the board can reconsider. A few parents nodded. It sounded reasonable. That was why it was dangerous. A private retake would not erase a public accusation. It would only teach everyone that Margaret had been right to doubt her. Lena leaned toward her father. "Dad," she whispered. Roy looked at her. Her face was still. "Too still, please," she said. "Let's just go." That almost broke him, not because she was guilty, because she was 16. Because every person in that gym had just been invited to look at her like she had stolen something. Because sometimes a child would rather lose her future quietly than keep sitting under a room full of eyes. Roy's hand moved into his pocket. His thumb found the truck key. For 1 second, he was back in every hard place he had ever been in as a father. The doctor's office with no second adult beside him. The parent-teacher meeting after a 12-hour shift. The grocery aisle where he counted bills in his head and put something back without letting Lena notice. He could take her out. He could get her away from the microphone, the board table, the parents, the whispers. He could let them hurt her softer. Then Roy looked at the bleachers. He looked at the students who had heard the accusation. He looked at the reporter near the aisle, writing in a small notebook. He looked at Margaret Ainsley sitting behind a microphone, offering privacy only after she had made the doubt public. Roy took his hand off the key. He stood. He did not shout, he did not point, but when he spoke the gym heard him. No. Margaret blinked once. Roy looked at the chair. You questioned her here. He turned just enough for the bleachers to feel included, in front of them. Then he looked back at Lena. You'll clear her here. The chair shifted in his seat. Mr. Keegan, I understand this is emotional. No, Roy said again. It's not emotional, it's a record. That made the chair stop. Roy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the blue spiral notebook. It looked like nothing. Bent cover, flattened wire, a dark smudge where it had rubbed against tools in the truck. A few people in the bleachers leaned forward, then leaned back, disappointed. It was not dramatic enough for them. Roy placed it on the table. This is her work. Margaret barely glanced at it. Roy opened the first tab, then the second, then the third. Dates ran down the top corners. Problems filled the pages. Wrong starts stayed visible. Corrections were written beside them. Some answers were circled. Some were crossed out. Some pages had coffee rings from mornings when Roy had driven Lena to school early so she could study before class. On 3 different pages, the same type of mistake appeared. On 3 different pages, Lena caught it the same way. The auditor leaned closer. Roy turned the notebook toward him. For months, Roy said, same hand, same habit. She solves once, then checks it another way. He flipped to a page where the first solution was wrong. The second caught the mistake, and Lena had written 2 words in the margin. Second way. Roy looked at Margaret. A girl who memorized an answer key does not leave 4 months of wrong turns in a notebook. Nobody laughed, but silence was not belief yet. Roy knew that. A notebook could be doubted. A father could be dismissed. A child like Lena could still be treated like an exception too inconvenient to accept. So Roy closed the notebook. Then he looked at the auditor. Give her a blank sheet. The auditor's eyes lifted. Roy kept his voice level. Give her a problem she has never seen. Margaret's pen stopped moving. Roy looked at the clock above the scoreboard, put it on the timer. The gym went still around the edges. The chair looked at the auditor. The auditor looked down at the sealed packet. It would have to be from the verification set, he said. Roy nodded. That's why you brought it. The auditor broke the seal. That sound did more to the room than any speech could have. Paper tearing, official, irreversible. He pulled out one problem, placed it face down, and slid a blank sheet beside it. No calculator, he said. 8 minutes. Lena stood, but for a moment she could not move. Every person who had looked at her before was looking again. The students, the parents, the board, the reporter. Brendan Ainsley, sitting behind his mother, staring at the floor like he wished he could disappear through it. Roy wanted to put a hand on Lena's shoulder. He did not. This had to belong to her. Lena walked to the table. The auditor turned the page over. She picked up the pencil. Her hand shook so badly the first line came out too dark. Behind her, Roy said quietly, second way, Lena. Lena closed her eyes once, then her hand steadied. She read the problem, read it again, then she began. At first there was still noise. A cough, a chair creak, a whisper that got halfway through a sentence before the person speaking seemed to remember where they were. Then the room lost sound in pieces. The woman on the left side of the board stopped flipping through her folder. The chair stopped looking at Margaret and started looking at Lena's paper. The reporter near the aisle stopped writing commentary and began writing what Lena was doing. The parent who had shaken his head earlier looked down at his shoes. A student who had smirked earlier lowered his eyes. Lena solved the problem once. She underlined the result. Then, without looking up, she drew a second line and started again. Different method, different path, same destination. The auditor leaned in, not politely, professionally, like he had just seen something that changed the question. Halfway through the second solution, he picked up the scoring rubric, then set it down. He did not need it yet. The chair leaned in next. A board member removed her glasses and forgot to put them back on. Margaret looked at the notebook, then at the page, then at the clock. No one was looking to her for direction anymore. That was the first shift. Small, visible, power leaving the person who had started the room doubting and moving toward the girl with the pencil. Lena circled the point where the two methods met. She checked one constraint in the corner. Then she set the pencil down. The clock still had 42 seconds left. The auditor picked up the page. The gym did not breathe around him. He read the first solution, then the second. Then he looked at the notebook Roy had opened on the table. Same structure, same habit, same mind. The auditor turned to the microphone. This is not a memorized answer. His voice was flat and official. The kind of voice that does not need drama because the record is drama enough. She derived the result two independent ways. The second method also identifies the constraint built into the problem. He looked toward the board. That is not copied. That is not guessed. That is demonstrated understanding. Then he looked at Lena. You know what you're doing. For a second, Lena did not react. It was like the sentence had to travel through the whole room before it reached her. Roy saw her fingers loosen at her sides. The chair turned toward Margaret. Mrs. Ainsley. Margaret straightened. The chair looked down at the paperwork in front of him. For the record, this board has now observed Lena Keegan complete a sealed verification problem under supervision, without a calculator, within the allotted time, using two valid independent methods. He paused. Then he said the part Margaret had not wanted said. The record will also reflect that the integrity challenge was advanced by the parent of the student ranked directly below her. A sound moved through the bleachers. Not loud, not quite a gasp, more like a room realizing it had been standing on the wrong side of something. Brendan Ainsley's face turned red. He had not said a word all night. He was not the villain. That made Margaret look worse. Margaret reached for the microphone. The original score remained statistically unusual. The auditor answered before the chair could. She is statistically unusual. He tapped Lena's paper. That is the point of a scholarship exam. No one whispered after that. The chair folded his hands. Mrs. Ainsley, do you have evidence of misconduct beyond the statistical flag? Margaret looked at the notebook. For the first time that night she really looked. At the dates, at the wrong answers, at the crossed-out work, at all the second ways, at months of a child becoming excellent in private before being doubted in public. Margaret's voice was thin. No. The chair did not move on. Do you have evidence that Lena Keegan accessed exam materials? No. Evidence that she copied from another student? No. Evidence that her submitted score does not belong to her? Margaret's eyes flicked toward Lena, then Roy, then the microphone. No. The chair let the last answer sit in the gym. Then he said, for the record, do you withdraw the integrity challenge? Margaret swallowed. I withdraw it. Roy's jaw tightened. The chair heard what was missing. Mrs. Ainsley, the challenge was made by name. The withdrawal will be made by name. Margaret stared at him. The room waited. The same room that had heard profile. The same room that had heard honest students. The same room that had watched Lena fold into her chair. Margaret leaned toward the microphone. I withdraw the integrity challenge against Lena Keegan. The chair did not look away, and Margaret's mouth hardened. Then finally the words came out. Her score should be certified. Roy did not smile. He did not turn around to see who looked ashamed. He did not make Margaret smaller, because that had never been the point. He only looked at the board and said, "She did the work." Then, after a moment, "I just taught her not to trust the first number." The chair struck the flag from the record. The auditor signed the certification. Then the chair lifted the scholarship list. All night, Lena's name had been held behind a question mark. Now it went into the microphone clean. Lena Keegan. It crossed the gym differently this time, past the parents who had nodded, past the students who had turned around, past the reporter writing every word down, past Margaret Ainsley who had nothing left to add. Roy leaned toward the table. "Say it again." The chair looked up. Roy's voice stayed calm. She heard the doubt in front of everyone. He looked toward the bleachers. Let her hear the truth the same way. Nobody laughed. Nobody whispered. The chair looked back at the list. This time he read it slower. Lena Keegan, certified scholarship recipient. In the third row, Lena stood, not quickly, not for applause. She stood like someone remembering her own height, all the way up. The reporter wrote her name twice. Brendan Ainsley looked at Lena for the first time all night, not with anger, with embarrassment, maybe even respect. Roy looked at his daughter then, only then, and for the first time that night, the truck key in his pocket stopped turning. Later, the blue notebook went back to the little house. Roy did not frame it. Lena did not want it behind glass. It went on the shelf near the refrigerator, close to the certified letter and the yellow star magnet that had held the first score for 9 good days before the world tried to make it dirty. The scholarship paid for a future Roy could never have bought, but that was not the only thing Lena carried out of that gym. She carried out the sound of her name being corrected. She carried out the knowledge that quiet does not mean weak. And she carried out one truth Roy had given her long before any board understood it. When the first number is wrong, find the second way. When the first story is false, make them read the record again. So here is the question. If that were your child, would you take the quiet retake just to escape the room? Or would you make the people who questioned her say her name clean in front of everyone? Tell me in the comments. And if you believe the room that shames a child should be the same room that clears her, subscribe and stay for the next story.